So here I am on a February winter day. Today's objective is on this porch here that we're framing up, this timber frame porch, is to figure out the hip rafter for this outside corner. Here I'm using 3x6 hemlock for the rafters. Step number one for me was to draw this up in CAD so that I didn't have to figure out all the math and potentially get it wrong, which I'm still hoping that this all works out. So I'm gonna have, this is the outside corner of the porch roof. Here's the outside corner of the house. So what I'm gonna do is have two rafters. I'm gonna double up the hip rafters on the outside corner. So basically through drawing that and then being able to project the lines down, I was able to basically draw all the dimensions I would need that would figure it out. So then what I did was I printed out the top and bottom of the rafter at full scale. The other one's over here, so that I can overlay this on the rafter and cut it out exactly what it needs to be. So we'll start cutting and see how it goes. Okay, so I got the templates cut out for the ends of the rafter tails. That one is the overhang there, and then this is the template for the top. So I just cut out the paper that I had printed out at full scale and then transferred it to a piece of Luan and then cut it out. I'm gonna have to make multiple hip rafters, so I figured it would be better if I had a template that I could easily scribe the cuts on it. The other thing I wanted to describe to you in the drawing here is, if you see the rafter, I have like one overlaid as dashed, and that's because just for my mind to kind of visualize this, because the hip is at a 45. I got two 312 roofs coming together at an outside corner, so that dashed line would be one side of the rafter, and then the solid line is the other side of the rafter. And you can kind of see, if you would project this dotted line up, you hit that point, and then if you project this line up, you hit that point there. So all these cuts gotta be basically 45. Even where they're sitting on the bird's mouth, that cut will have to be at a 45-degree angle. And then this top cut up here, where it's going to be bearing on the ledger, is also going to have to be cut at a 45. So I just did that so that when I'm cutting, I can kind of visually see what it should look like on paper. That way I hopefully don't screw it up. Okay, so here I have one cut out here. So I'll show you what I did. I put that on this side to make that mark there, to cut that out. Then, because it's an outside corner, had the 45 that at the slope of the hip, that angle right there. And then I marked it back here. So the thing I figured out going through this and was that this bird's mouth, where it bears on the beam, has to be flat and flush all the way through. So if you look down at this actually tapers to a smaller depth here from this side to the back, because I want this tight to the beam, with it being I'm going to have two one on each side. So this is the outside corner of the porch beams it's going to rest on, so it tapers back. So to find that, here's the other side, and you'll see I marked it here to give me an idea. This is where the other one is, right on the other side. So, and then I basically just slid, so to find where that was, I marked that, marked it on this side like that so I could get this angle. I knew where this was to keep it flat all the way through. And then what I did was I drew a 45 from this point all the way to here, and then I knew exactly where that had to be. So then I just slid this down, put it to there, and then I got this angle. Because this angle is not straight off of the, it's not a 90 off of that. It's at the same slope of the roof. So that's how I figured that out. And then I cut that out, and that's what I got. So I had to take the beam saw, and I actually cut on the other side first. So I took the beam saw and I cut down along this side to this point. I couldn't continue through, otherwise the circular saw blade would have been cutting through this piece right here, which I wanted to keep. So I cut up to this line with the big saw to get it all the way through, and then I flipped it down, and then there was like this much left. I cut it with a smaller circular saw so that I didn't cut any of this piece here. And then after that, because this is at the slope of the roof, the 3 17, I used a small circular saw, set the blade at 45 degrees, and then I cut along that line, and then did the same thing on the other side. Flipped it over, set the circular saw at a 45, and then cut along this line. And then with using a circular saw, you see here there's a couple irregularities here, but basically just use the chisel to clean that up a bit. So if I go down to the other end, if I come down to the other end, you'll see how this looks here. And this piece is also tapered at the 45 angle here, but then these angles are the 3 17, which is the slope of the hip. And here's the template I used for that. So I marked it here first. Okay, so I marked that here, and then I cut that 45 off just straight all the way through. And then if I flip this around, I basically had to do the same thing, which I marked this. You'll see those lines. I marked that exactly where it would be on the other side, and then drew a 45 here. So I got this line set so that this piece was flat, same level all the way through. And then once I did that, I slid this up till it hit that 45, and then I knew exactly where this line needed to be. So you see a little bit of it chipped off there whenever we were cleaning that up a little bit. But that is that cut right there. That's what that looks like. So the only other thing I have to do with this one is I have to taper the top of this. I got to taper the top of this off, since I'm putting two together, so that the roof sheathing will run up that slope, and then when the jack rafters tie into it, it'll just be jack rafter will run into the side of this, and then it'll be like a continuous slope up to the high side of this rafter. So I basically will take the beam saw, set it at a 10 degrees, which is about a 3 17 slope, to get that. So basically I just run that beam saw the whole length of this to just taper a little bit off. And so you'll see I've done it to one already. So there's the taper that I cut off to a couple of the hip rafters that I already got completely cut out. So here I have these two cut out and complete. So we cut them out and we put them together. We bolted them together so that they stayed tight to one another. But hopefully some of these cuts will make sense when I show it to you here. So go up the ladder here. So those cuts I made, that's kind of what it looks like. Coming to the outside corner of the house. And there it is. So that's that cut. And then if we go above, you'll see the taper that I made here on this side of the roof. And I also made the same taper opposite direction on the other side. So those two are tapered. So I'll show you the cut at the overhang. So here's the overhang, but you can see I cut those 45s at the slope, so they meet at a pretty good outside corner there, so that they'll line up, hopefully with that fascia board that we put on, come all the way through and tie into that. So show you what it looks like up here. So you'll see here this beam was sitting a little bit lower than this one, so we had to shim up that gap there to keep it level. But there's what it looks like on the outside. So you'll notice that there's a little bit of a gap there, and it's about the same on the other side. So the only thing I can reason here is that this outside corner is maybe either a little out of square or just a little bit in from what it should have been. So I debated cutting the top of these rafters, so it would slide back tight. But then my concern was, because I'm cutting all the other rafters to exact length that they need to be, I was concerned that if I pull this in, then I might pull in the overhang a little bit, and then the fascias wouldn't line up with each other. So I decided to leave it and figured that we could come back here and possibly fill that in with a piece of wood to just kind of blend it together. But from the ground, it's not really that noticeable. It's not perfect, but there was a lot that took to get to that point. So you see how that gap's pretty much the same there. So, which isn't a big deal for me. I think we can kind of blend it in and you won't really notice from the ground. So I'll get a view of it down there for you. So here it is from ground level here. Which, if you really look for it, you can see that gap. But again, I don't think it's that big of a deal that we can't put something there to kind of blend it in. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy. So today we'll start cutting the jack rafters for that, and we'll get the rest of the beams up here on the porch, down the side and around the back. That way we can put the other hip I have mostly cut out on that back corner. But there is the double 3x6 hip rafter. Okay, so here we are. We got the all the jack rafters on this side of the roof tied into the hip rafter there.